The frozen air burned with silence as Daniel Carter said, "Every journey begins with a question, and mine lies buried beneath endless white." He gripped the rail of the icebreaker, his breath forming ghostly clouds that drifted into the night. Emily Ross said, "You've crossed half the world chasing whispers. But do you even know what you're truly searching for?" Daniel smiled faintly, though his eyes betrayed exhaustion and obsession. "I know enough," Daniel said. "That history hides truths the world was never meant to see." The ship pushed forward, crunching through slabs of drifting ice, its spotlight sweeping across jagged blue ridges. A shadowed figure stood apart near the stern, Professor Adrian Cole, quietly observing with an unreadable calm. "Some doors remain closed for a reason," Adrian said under his breath, his words lost in the howl of the wind. Emily turned to him sharply. "If there are secrets down there, humanity deserves to know." Adrian's lips curled in a thin smile, his gloved hands tightening on the railing. Daniel raised his voice above the groan of ice. "Antarctica has waited millennia for someone to listen, and I intend to hear it." The vessel lurched as another iceberg scraped its hull, the sound deep and resonant like a warning. Emily steadied herself, her eyes scanning the horizon where the endless white blended with a sky choked in stars. "Then may the ice forgive us," Emily whispered, her words swept away into the frozen void. The ship's mess hall rattled with every groan of shifting ice, its metal walls creaking like an old beast. Daniel Carter said, "Every map I've studied points to the same coordinates, where the ice grows unnaturally thick." Emily Ross said, "Coordinates don't prove what lies beneath, Daniel." She pushed her mug of coffee away, its steam vanishing quickly into the cold air. Adrian Cole sat silently at the far end of the table, his eyes fixed on papers spread before him, though his ears never missed a word. "Some knowledge is best left untouched," Adrian said, his voice sharp as the metal chairs scraping against the floor. Daniel leaned forward, his voice low but fierce. "If something ancient sleeps beneath Antarctica, then it belongs to all of us, not to those who bury it in silence." The room's flickering lights hummed as the ship shuddered again, echoing Daniel's unease. The storm outside howled like a living thing, battering the ship with icy fists. Emily Ross said, "Nature itself seems to resist us." Daniel Carter pressed his palm against a frosted window, staring out at the blinding snow. "Resistance only proves there's something worth finding," Daniel said, his breath fogging the glass. Adrian Cole stood just behind them, his reflection ghostly in the window. "Or it proves the earth itself is warning us," Adrian murmured. Emily turned, unease pulling her brows together. "Warnings are meant to be heeded," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Daniel's jaw tightened as thunderous cracks of ice echoed through the hull, a sound like bones breaking beneath the weight of centuries. The crew gathered in uneasy silence as maps and charts were spread across the central table. Daniel Carter traced lines with gloved fingers. "These ancient markings predate any modern survey," he said. Emily Ross leaned in, her brow furrowed. "They suggest knowledge no one should have had centuries ago." Adrian Cole stood with arms folded, his voice cold. "Or they are fabrications meant to trap the gullible." Daniel's eyes flared. "Then why do they lead to the same coordinates as modern scans?" A murmur passed among the sailors, their faces pale in lantern glow. The hum of engines blended with the groaning ice, underscoring the tension in the room. The icebreaker slowed, engines straining against a wall of ice rising like a fortress before them. Daniel Carter said, "This is it, the threshold." Emily Ross whispered, "It looks more like a tomb than an entrance." Adrian Cole narrowed his eyes, his breath a silver mist. "And perhaps that's exactly what it is." The crew shuffled nervously, gripping rails as the ship cracked through the final barrier. A booming sound shook the vessel, echoing like a warning bell. Daniel raised his chin, defiance in his stance. "Secrets don't stay buried forever," Daniel said. The ship edged into a vast inlet, its waters black as obsidian, silence pressing down heavier than the ice itself. The ship edged deeper into the inlet, walls of ice towering like cathedral spires on both sides. Daniel Carter said, "These cliffs hold markings that no glacier should bear." Emily Ross brushed frost from her goggles, staring wide-eyed. "Carvings," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Adrian Cole stood firm, his silver hair gleaming in moonlight. "Illusions born from fractured ice," Adrian said, though doubt crept into his tone. Daniel leaned closer to the edge, his hand gripping the frozen railing. "Nature doesn't draw symbols," Daniel said, his voice fierce. A sailor muttered nervously, crossing himself. Emily reached for Daniel's arm, fear in her touch. "If this is what we've found on the surface, what lies below may consume us," Emily said. Adrian exhaled frost, his eyes narrowing at the ancient shapes etched in glowing ice. "And still you march forward into a grave you've chosen," Adrian muttered. The ship's engines thundered, echoing off the cliffs like drums of warning. The crew gathered on deck under dim lamps, their breath rising like smoke against the Antarctic night. Emily Ross said, "These symbols aren't random. They resemble glyphs I studied in forgotten maritime logs." Daniel Carter's eyes widened, pulling a notebook from his satchel. "Then others have seen this before," Daniel said, his tone urgent. Adrian Cole crossed his arms, his shadow stretching long across the deck. "Sailors tell tales when the sea drives them mad," Adrian said coldly. A younger crewman whispered, "Or when the ice tells them truths too heavy to carry." Emily looked to Daniel, determination overcoming her fear. "If someone left these marks centuries ago, then we're not the first to stand here," Emily said. The ship creaked and swayed, the cliffs groaning as if they heard her words. Daniel's voice cut through the wind. "Then we will be the first to understand them." Snow whipped sideways across the deck as the storm intensified. Daniel Carter pressed his notebook to his chest, shielding it from the wind. "These symbols map more than ice," Daniel said. Emily Ross fought the storm, her scarf whipping wildly. "They form a sequence," Emily said, shouting to be heard. Adrian Cole steadied himself with the rail, his eyes narrowed. "A sequence to where?" Adrian asked sharply. Daniel's voice was carried by the storm. "To a structure," Daniel said. The words drew uneasy stares from sailors huddling nearby. Emily's eyes sparkled with both awe and dread. "A structure buried for centuries," Emily whispered. Adrian shook his head. "Buried things are often meant to stay buried," Adrian muttered. The ship groaned, ice grinding against its hull, as though the sea itself tried to swallow their secret. Inside the chart room, lanterns cast shaky circles of light on scattered maps. Emily Ross traced glyphs sketched in Daniel's notebook with trembling fingers. "These aren't just symbols, they're coordinates," Emily said. Daniel Carter leaned forward, intensity burning in his eyes. "Coordinates that match satellite scans," Daniel said, his voice resolute. Adrian Cole's face darkened, his shadow looming over the maps. "Do you hear yourselves? You're building castles out of illusions," Adrian said bitterly. Emily's voice steadied. "Illusions don't align with science," she said firmly. Daniel pounded the table, rattling mugs. "This is the threshold of history itself," Daniel said. Adrian turned away, exhaling through clenched teeth. The silence of the crew grew heavier than the storm outside, their eyes shifting between belief and dread. The ship finally reached a cavernous opening in the cliffs, a yawning black maw rimmed with jagged ice. Daniel Carter stood at the bow, his eyes burning. "This is it," Daniel said, his voice echoing against frozen walls. Emily Ross clutched the railing, her face pale. "It looks like an entrance carved by hands," Emily said. Adrian Cole's jaw tightened, his voice low and heavy. "Or like a trap carved by time itself," Adrian said. The crew murmured nervously, their breaths clouds in the frigid air. The ship's spotlight cut into the abyss, revealing walls unnaturally smooth. Emily whispered, "This wasn't shaped by nature." Daniel raised his hand toward the darkness. "Then it's proof," Daniel said. The ship crept forward, swallowed by the shadows of the ice. The cavern swallowed the ship, its walls rising smooth and unnatural, gleaming with faint luminescence. Daniel Carter said, "These surfaces have been cut, not formed." His words echoed, swallowed by the icy void. Emily Ross pressed her gloved hand against the glistening wall, her breath catching. "This feels like stone hidden beneath ice," Emily whispered, awe softening her voice. Adrian Cole watched from behind, his silver hair catching the beam of the lantern. "Or it feels like a tomb waiting to collapse," Adrian said grimly. The crew shuffled uneasily, their boots clanging against the metal deck, fear reflected in their eyes. Daniel's notebook shook in his hand as he traced glyphs illuminated by the spotlight. "The symbols are older than language we know," Daniel said, voice tight with excitement. Emily stepped closer, her eyes widening as she compared the lines to sketches. "They match fragments found in pre-Ice Age cultures," Emily said, trembling. Adrian exhaled sharply, his patience thinning. "You cannot tie myths to reality without consequence," Adrian said. The cavern groaned, a deep rumble rolling like thunder through the stone-veiled ice. The ship anchored in still black waters within the cavern, its engines silenced by command. Daniel Carter stood at the bow, his voice steady. "This is where the path begins." Emily Ross unfolded the notebook, tracing lines by lantern glow. "The coordinates align with what's beneath this cavern," Emily said, her tone shaking with discovery. Adrian Cole paced slowly along the deck, his gloved hand brushing the railing. "If you awaken what sleeps here, it will not forgive," Adrian said darkly. Daniel raised his eyes toward the abyss, determination etched across his face. "Truth doesn't require forgiveness," Daniel said firmly. Emily glanced at him, torn between admiration and fear. The cavern's ceiling dripped with icy water, droplets falling like the ticking of a clock. Crewmen whispered uneasily, one murmuring prayers into his scarf. Adrian stopped, turning toward Daniel with cold finality. "Some truths demand silence," Adrian said, his voice cutting through the hush. Daniel looked back at him, unyielding. "Not from me," Daniel replied. The crew lowered a steel cage elevator into the dark waters, chains rattling like bones. Daniel Carter adjusted his hood, stepping forward. "I'll descend first," Daniel said, his voice carrying conviction. Emily Ross grabbed his arm, her eyes wide. "You don't know what's waiting beneath," Emily said urgently. Adrian Cole stepped closer, his presence looming. "Let him go," Adrian said coldly. "Sometimes, curiosity must punish itself." Daniel met his gaze, fire in his eyes. "You fear what you already know," Daniel said, his tone sharp. Emily's voice cracked. "Then let me go with him," Emily said, though fear trembled in her words. Adrian shook his head. "No one should follow him into madness," Adrian said. The elevator creaked, its steel bars dripping condensation. Daniel placed his notebook into Emily's hands. "If I don't return, you'll know what to do," Daniel said. Emily clutched it tightly, her eyes filled with both dread and reluctant resolve. The steel cage descended into the abyss, lantern swinging wildly as the waters swallowed Daniel Carter. His voice echoed from below. "Every sound is magnified here," Daniel said, awe vibrating in his tone. Emily Ross leaned over the railing, her knuckles white on the steel. "Be careful," Emily shouted, her voice breaking. Adrian Cole stood behind her, his face unreadable. "The abyss doesn't answer warnings," Adrian muttered. The chains groaned, links straining as the cage sank deeper. Daniel's breath crackled over the radio. "The walls aren't ice. They're smooth like obsidian," Daniel said. Emily pressed the receiver to her lips. "What do you see?" Emily asked, her tone breathless. A pause followed, then Daniel's voice cut through static. "Patterns repeating, like architecture," Daniel said. Adrian's eyes darkened, his hands tightening on the railing. "You've crossed into a grave," Adrian whispered. Emily glanced back at him, terror widening her eyes, as water dripped steadily from the rusting chains. Daniel's radio crackled with static before his words returned. I see carvings, etched along black stone walls, Daniel said, his voice filled with awe. Emily Ross clutched the receiver tightly, her eyes wide. What do they mean? Emily asked, her voice trembling. Silence followed, broken only by the chain's groan. Then Daniel whispered, They look like warnings. Adrian Cole's face tightened, shadows carving harsh lines across his features. I told you, Adrian said. Some doors are meant to remain sealed. Emily's breath quickened, her voice breaking. Daniel, you must come back up. Emily pleaded. The line hissed with static. Then Daniel's tone turned sharper. No, I must go deeper, Daniel said. The crew exchanged fearful glances, whispers echoing against the cavern walls. Adrian's voice cut coldly. If he descends further, none of us may return, Adrian said. Emily's heart pounded, the words slamming against her chest as she leaned over the abyss, clutching the radio with trembling hands. Daniel Carter's voice crackled through the radio, heavy with awe. The cage touched ground. Its stone, smooth, and deliberate. Emily Ross pressed the receiver to her lips, whispering with urgency. Daniel, describe what you see. Lantern light flickered on her pale face, tension pulling at every line. Daniel's breath rasped through static. Columns, carved, rising higher than the light can reach, Daniel said, his voice shaking with reverence. Adrian Cole stepped forward, his shadow long across the deck. He has found what should not be found, Adrian muttered, bitterness biting every word. Emily's grip on the radio tightened until her knuckles whitened. Stay calm, Daniel. Record everything, Emily said, though her voice quivered. Crewmen gathered close, wide-eyed, as if fearing Daniel's words would summon shadows from the deep. The cavern groaned above them, echoing Daniel's discovery like a pulse through the frozen stone. Daniel's voice trembled as he continued. There's writing carved into the stone, spirals, symbols, all interlinked. Emily Ross flipped open the notebook, frantic. Do they match the glyphs we saw above? Emily asked, her tone sharp. Daniel hesitated before speaking. Some match, others, no. These are older. Adrian Cole's eyes narrowed, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. Older than myth, Adrian said coldly. Emily's hand shook as she traced the sketches with her gloved finger. This could rewrite human history, Emily said, awe softening her voice. Adrian snapped, or it could doom us all to repeat forgotten mistakes. The radio crackled with static, the air heavy with tension. Daniel's voice broke through again. Something lies deeper. A doorway carved into the stone, Daniel said. The words made every sailor glance toward the abyss, unease spreading like a chill. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling as Daniel Carter's words returned. The doorway is sealed with a black stone slab, smooth and seamless. Emily Ross pressed harder against the receiver. Don't touch it, Daniel, Emily pleaded. Silence followed, broken by the rattle of chains straining under weight. Daniel's breath came fast. I feel heat radiating from the stone, Daniel said. Adrian Cole's face hardened, voice sharp as ice. Bring him up now, Adrian commanded. Emily shook her head, defiance breaking through fear. If we stop him, we may never see this again, Emily said. Adrian snapped, his voice harsh. Or if he opens it, we may never leave alive. The crew stirred, whispers thick with dread. The cavern groaned, as if echoing Adrian's warning. Then Daniel's voice rose again, trembling with wonder. The slab has markings glowing faintly, pulsing like veins, Daniel said. Emily's eyes widened as terror mingled with fascination. Static filled the air before Daniel Carter's breathless voice broke through. The slab shifted, only slightly, but it moved. Emily Ross gasped, clutching the radio. Daniel, stop. It isn't safe, Emily cried. Adrian Cole's hand slammed onto the railing. Pull him up, Adrian ordered, his tone unyielding. Daniel's tone burned with obsession. No, there's something behind it, something vast, Daniel said. Emily's eyes filled with tears, torn between loyalty and terror. You're risking everything, Emily said softly, her voice trembling. Adrian leaned close, his words sharp and cutting. If he continues, he damns us all, Adrian said. The cavern rumbled, dust falling from the icy ceiling, the ship swaying slightly in black waters. Crewmen muttered prayers, their voices thin and desperate. Daniel whispered through static, almost reverently. I can hear it. A sound like heartbeats inside the stone, Daniel said. The words froze the air colder than the ice itself. The cavern fell silent, save for the faint thrum echoing from the sealed slab. Daniel Carter's voice carried softly through the static. This is not stone. It feels alive. Emily Ross's heart pounded as she whispered, alive? Her voice cracked. Adrian Cole's eyes burned with fury, his words slicing the air. End this madness now, Adrian said, his tone venomous. Daniel exhaled sharply. No. If this is alive, then it has waited for us, Daniel said. Emily pressed her palm to her lips, fear and awe battling within. Daniel, please, don't go further, Emily begged. Adrian snarled, fists tightening on the rail. If he opens it, we are already dead, Adrian said. The crew shivered, whispers spreading like wildfire among them. Suddenly the radio shrieked with a high-pitched hum. Daniel's voice broke through one last time. It's opening, Daniel said. Silence followed, heavy as the abyss itself. The deck was heavy with silence, after Daniel Carter's last words echoed through the radio. Emily Ross gripped the device, her heart pounding. Daniel, come back now, she cried, desperation raw in her tone. Static hissed, filling the void. Adrian Cole stepped closer, his silver hair glinting in lantern light. He has gone too far, Adrian said coldly, his voice steady as stone. Emily turned on him sharply. You don't want him to succeed, Emily accused, her eyes blazing with fury. Adrian's smirk was thin, controlled. Success at the cost of life is failure, Adrian replied. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, fear turning to mistrust. A younger sailor muttered, Maybe he's right. Maybe we should stop. Emily shook her head, her voice trembling. If we turn back now, history remains buried forever, Emily said. Adrian's gaze pierced hers. Better buried than awakened, Adrian said firmly. The ship groaned, echoing like judgment through the cavern. Daniel's voice burst through static, breathless and sharp. The slab. It opened. Emily Ross gasped, pressing the radio close. Daniel, what do you see? She demanded, her voice cracking. Silence stretched, then Daniel whispered, light, blinding. Something vast behind it. Adrian Cole clenched the railing, his knuckles white. Pull him up. Adrian barked. Emily shouted over him, No, let him describe it first. The crew flinched, divided between loyalty and terror. Daniel's voice rose again, trembling with awe. There's a chamber, enormous, carved with spirals that glow like fire, Daniel said. Emily's breath caught, her body trembling. This could be the greatest discovery of our time, Emily whispered. Adrian's face darkened, his voice dripping with venom. Or the last mistake we ever make, Adrian said. The cavern walls pulsed faintly, as if answering Daniel's words. The crew erupted in argument, voices clashing as the cavern amplified every word. Emily Ross stood tall, shouting above the noise. We must stand with Daniel, she said, her voice ringing. Adrian Cole's glare cut through her words like ice. Stand with him into ruin? Adrian retorted. Sailors muttered among themselves, fear shifting into anger. One man spat on the floor, muttering, He'll doom us all. Emily's voice shook as she stepped closer to Adrian. You fear what you can't control, Emily accused. Adrian's eyes flashed, his jaw tightening. I fear ignorance dressed as discovery, Adrian said. Daniel's voice whispered faintly through static. Something moves inside the chamber. The words froze every heart on deck. Emily gasped, her lips trembling. Alive, she whispered. Adrian's face twisted, half fury, half dread. Alive? Adrian repeated bitterly, his tone a curse. The air thickened with dread as Daniel's radio voice shook. Something emerged from the light. It's not human. Emily Ross's face paled, tears forming. Daniel, please come back. Emily cried, her voice breaking. Adrian Cole's voice thundered across the deck. He has opened the abyss. Pull him up before we all drown in his folly. Adrian commanded. Crewmen scrambled at the winches, but their hands shook, fear gripping their every move. Emily threw herself at the radio. Daniel, hold on. Don't lose sight of yourself, Emily begged. The cavern rumbled, the waters shifting violently as though stirred by something colossal. Daniel's breath was ragged, his words gasping. It watches me. Eyes burning, endless, Daniel said. Emily fell to her knees, sobbing. You're not alone, Daniel, Emily whispered. Adrian's face twisted in rage. Enough. We end this now, Adrian shouted. The crew hesitated, torn between obedience and horror. The steel chains screeched as the cage began to rise, water cascading off its sides. Daniel's voice came faintly, strained. I can't leave it. It's calling me. Emily Ross clutched the radio, screaming. Daniel, fight it. Don't listen. Adrian Cole turned sharply, his eyes burning. If he listens, he'll damn us all, Adrian shouted. The crew strained, the winch rattling violently as the cage lifted higher. The cavern vibrated with a low hum, the slab below glowing brighter, cracks spreading like veins of fire. Daniel cried out through static, his voice filled with torment. It's inside my mind. Emily sobbed, shaking her head. No, Daniel, you're stronger than this, Emily said. Adrian's lips curled in fury. If he sets foot back on this ship, we all die. Adrian spat. Crewmen froze, staring at him, fear turning into disbelief. Emily's eyes flared with defiance. I'll never abandon him, Emily said. The cage clattered onto the deck, water streaming off Daniel Carter's trembling frame. His eyes burned with terror, his voice ragged. It's inside me, Daniel gasped. Emily Ross fell to her knees beside him, pressing a hand to his arm. You're safe now, Emily whispered, though her tone betrayed doubt. Adrian Cole loomed behind them, his face hard as granite. He has been touched by it, Adrian declared coldly. Daniel shook his head violently. No. It showed me, Daniel said, his voice trembling. Emily gripped his shoulders. What did you see? Emily asked. Daniel's gaze drifted past them, toward the cavern's dark waters. A figure, Daniel whispered. Someone who was lost, long ago. The crew exchanged fearful glances, whispers passing among them like wind through broken glass. Adrian leaned closer, his voice sharp. Visions meant to deceive, Adrian said, his words like blades. Daniel's eyes filled with anguish. No, it was real. I saw the victim. Daniel's words tumbled out like broken glass. The victim, a man bound in chains of ice, crying out across centuries. Emily Ross's lips parted, her voice shaking. Who was he? Emily asked softly. Daniel's face twisted in pain. A prisoner betrayed, left to die so the truth would stay buried, Daniel said. Adrian Cole's eyes narrowed, suspicion sharp in his stare. You speak of illusions designed to ensnare fools, Adrian said harshly. Daniel clutched his head, his voice rising. I heard his cries. He begged me to free him, Daniel said. Emily's eyes shimmered with tears. Then he's connected to this place, Emily whispered. Adrian slammed his fist against the railing. No, connected to your madness, Adrian snapped. The crew recoiled at his fury, their faith splintering between fear and belief. Daniel's voice steadied, fire burning in his words. He is real. The victim is part of the truth, Daniel said. The notebook lay open on the table, Emily Ross tracing glyphs with trembling fingers. These symbols, they match what Daniel described, Emily said. Daniel leaned over, his hands shaking. The victim's story was carved into the walls, Daniel said, his voice cracking. Adrian Cole snorted, his smirk cruel. Carved by liars who prey on the desperate, Adrian said. Emily's voice hardened, defiance in her tone. Not lies, records, Emily said. Daniel lifted his head, eyes burning. He was betrayed by his own ally, Daniel said softly, voice heavy with grief. Adrian turned sharply, his eyes flashing. Ally? Or enemy, twisting his words to enslave you? Adrian asked. Emily stepped between them, her voice steady. Whatever the truth, it is written here, Emily said. The crew leaned in, lantern light flickering across anxious faces. Daniel whispered, his suffering was not for nothing. He is the key. The cavern quaked, dust falling from its ceiling as Daniel Carter shouted. The victim's betrayal is the foundation of this place. Emily Ross clutched the notebook, her voice sharp. His suffering sealed the doorway. Adrian Cole's voice boomed across the chamber. Lies carved to seduce explorers to ruin. Adrian thundered. Daniel turned on him, fury igniting. You knew, didn't you? You knew about the victim, Daniel said. Adrian's jaw tightened, silence betraying more than words. Emily's eyes widened. You've hidden this truth, Emily accused. The crew erupted in whispers, fear mixing with betrayal. Adrian's glare swept over them, cold and commanding. Truth can destroy civilizations, Adrian said. Daniel's voice rang out, cutting through the noise. Then let it, Daniel said, his words echoing through the cavern. The glow from the abyss below pulsed brighter, beating like a heart in the silence. The abyss glowed violently, as if reacting to their conflict. Daniel Carter raised his voice over the quake. The victim's chains bind something older than him. Emily Ross staggered, her eyes wide. Then releasing him may release what he held back, Emily cried. Adrian Cole advanced, fury in his stride. Exactly why he must remain forgotten, Adrian said. Daniel's fists clenched, his voice fierce. His pain cannot be wasted, Daniel said. Emily stepped between them, desperation trembling in her voice. We can't know what freeing him means, Emily said. The crew backed away, fear in their eyes, the cavern's glow reflecting like fire on their pale faces. Adrian snarled, better the world lives in ignorance than dies in revelation. Daniel shouted, no more lies. His words thundered as the cavern walls cracked, light bursting through jagged fissures. Emily gasped, her whisper carried into silence. We've already opened it, Emily said. The cavern roared as cracks widened, blinding light spilling out in jagged beams. Daniel Carter shielded his eyes, shouting over the chaos. The truth is breaking free. Emily Ross staggered beside him, her voice trembling. We can't control it, Daniel, she cried. Adrian Cole's face twisted with rage and dread. You've doomed us all, Adrian thundered. Crewmen fell back, shielding themselves from falling ice as the walls trembled violently. Daniel's voice burned with defiance. No, Adrian, you've kept the truth buried long enough, Daniel said. Emily reached for Daniel's hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. If we survive this, the world will change forever, Emily said. Adrian's eyes burned, his silver hair wild in the violent wind. And it will not survive the change, Adrian shouted. The abyss below pulsed brighter, each thrum like a heartbeat shaking the ship. The slab split fully, revealing a massive chamber glowing with spirals of fire-like light. Daniel Carter's voice shook. It's a vault, a prison. Emily Ross gripped his arm, eyes wide. Prison for what? Emily asked. Daniel's gaze locked on a chained figure within the glow, encased in crystalline ice. The victim, Daniel whispered. The figure's face was gaunt yet noble, frozen in agony. Adrian Cole stepped forward, voice thundering. He was bound to hold back what lies beyond him. Adrian shouted. Daniel's heart pounded, his voice fierce. No, he was betrayed and left to suffer, Daniel said. Emily's tears fell as she whispered, he's the key to it all. The crew gasped, fear spreading like fire across their faces. The chains glowed brighter, pulsing with the rhythm of the cavern's heart. Adrian roared, "Break those chains and you end us!" The chains cracked, fragments of glowing ice falling to the floor. Daniel Carter stepped forward, his voice filled with conviction. "We must free him." Emily Ross shook her head, terror in her voice. "If he was bound, there's a reason," Emily said. Adrian Cole stormed forward, fury in his eyes. "Listen to her. For once she speaks truth," Adrian shouted. Daniel raised his hand, his eyes locked on the figure. "His betrayal binds this place. Free him and the lies end," Daniel said. The cavern shook, the chamber's glow intensifying. Emily grabbed Daniel's sleeve, desperate. "You'll destroy everything," Emily cried. Daniel looked back at her, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Everything was already broken," Daniel said softly. Adrian snarled, his voice like thunder. "If you do this, Daniel, you'll unleash what no man can stop," Adrian warned. The final chain snapped, and the victim's eyes opened, glowing like suns within the ice. Daniel Carter staggered back, awe in his voice. "He's awake," Daniel whispered. Emily Ross clung to him, her body trembling. "What have you done?" Emily cried. The victim's voice resonated through the cavern, ancient and sorrowful. "I was bound to keep the darkness behind me from consuming the world," the victim said. Adrian Cole roared in triumph and fury. "I told you, he was not the prisoner, he was the guardian," Adrian shouted. Daniel's face drained of color, his voice breaking. "No, I set it free," Daniel said. The chamber's glow darkened, shadows swirling into shapes beyond comprehension. The crew screamed, their voices drowned by the abyss itself. Emily's sobs shook the air. "It's too late," Emily whispered. The cavern collapsed in thunder as the darkness poured forth, devouring light. Daniel Carter shouted over the chaos. "We can't let it escape!" Emily Ross clutched his hand, tears streaming. "We'll die if we stay," Emily screamed. Adrian Cole stood rigid, his face fierce. "Then we seal it again, with our lives if we must," Adrian shouted. Daniel turned to him, their eyes meeting with unspoken understanding. "Together then," Daniel said. Emily's sob was swallowed by the quake. The crew fled toward the ship, but the three remained at the brink of the abyss. Shadows surged upward, voices whispering with ancient hunger. Daniel raised his arms, shouting into the storm. "Truth must never be hidden again," Daniel cried. Emily's voice cracked, but some truths consume. Adrian's final roar echoed. "Then let it consume us first." The cavern sealed in blinding collapse, burying their fate in eternal ice.